serious Redditors who are now married because you didn't know how to break up with your so. How is that going for you? He genuinely seemed to care for me and love me. So, even though I knew I didn't love him as much, we could make it work. We had a fairly inexpensive wedding, moved in together and take care of each other. He pays the bills, I cook and clean, and we both put up with each other's shot. Until this past Wednesday when I discovered his HIV medication and he told me he'd had it for over 5 years. Longer than we knew each other. So he lied every day for 5 years, and that's what I'm dealing with now. My test came out negative, somehow. But it still feels like a deal breaker. Nothing will be the same as before and he's fully expecting for it to go back to how it was a week ago. My so and I were so totally opposite in our life choices when we first met that we both questioned whether we should continue dating or not. After deciding to see how things would work out, we eventually got married. 3 kids and 4 grandkids later, we are preparing to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary next month. It's been a wonderful life. We met in May, married in October. We divorced after 6 years and 2 kids. She wanted the marriage. Pushed for it. I didn't say no. I wanted to be married. Have kids, own a home. All of those things. I wasn't sure if it should have been with her. There were some red flags, but I hadn't found my voice. I didn't advocate for myself. She wanted married. She was 4 years older, and had already picked out a dress. Since I wasn't backing out, she decided that I was the one. The first year was good. Then, I saw the cracks in her lies. I suspected she cheated on me. She previously said that she cheated on every boyfriend she'd ever had, one of those red flags. Things just weren't adding up. Her going for a walk with our neighbor at 12:30 am, and not coming home till 5 am? We tried to work things through. Went to counseling for a year or so. I was still fighting for that life. Married. Wife, kids, and happy. Then, I didn't get into a commissioning program in the army. Our relationship went downhill with a quickness after that. I moved out. A trial separation. We had picked up counseling again. All of the issues were me. My communication. My parenting. Then, I found concrete proof she cheated 2 years into our marriage, with an entirely different person, and she was continuing multiple relationships, while still working on us. That next counseling session, I dropped the bomb. That, for the last 10 or so sessions, it was all about my issues. What about this guy, who happened to be her first cousin? Or that guy? Or this other guy? Surely, if you want to make it work you wouldn't be sending sexts to these other guys? The therapist asked if I could work through this, to refocus our sessions. Or if I still loved her. No and no. I was tired of the lies and gaslighting. I'll add my story to the mix. He and I had a very tumultuous relationship for the first few years together, due to emotional immaturity and trauma on both our parts. He was my rebound after my first true heartbreak, and we started dating way too soon. We fought often, broke up once or twice, and I constantly thought about leaving even after we'd moved in together. Still, I'd grown dependent on him in ways I now see were unhealthy, and while I did have feelings for him, part of me was just scared of being alone. When he shocked me by popping the question, my stomach dropped and I physically wanted to run. Every fiber in my body was yelling no, no, no. In that moment, but his proposal speech was so beautiful and heartfelt, and he was so vulnerable and open, that I muttered a bewildered yes before I could even process my feelings. Having to call our parents immediately to share the news was just torture. Honestly, looking back on that moment, I have no idea why I wasn't just honest with him, but there was a part of me that did love and care for him, and I wanted ... I don't know exactly, but I wanted to see if we could work ourselves out together, even though it all felt so hopeless and wrong. We've been together 8 years now, married 4, and I'm so happy to say that we are the perfect partners for each other. We've both grown so much on our own, through sheer and hard work, and in that process we've also grown together in ways I couldn't have imagined. He is the most insightful, self-aware man I've ever met, and he loves me more than I ever felt I deserved. And through him, I learned how to love, genuinely and, to the best of my abilities, selflessly. He is truly my other half in life, and without him I would be so lost. I'm so grateful that part of me that was scared and hopeless and wanted to run away screaming decided to stay, to wait and see if we could grow together, to see what life we could build together. The journey has been more painful and more difficult than anything I've ever faced, but it's also been the most precious and humbling and life-affirming experience in every way. As a wise man once said, the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love, and be loved in return. We'd been together 7 years, and it was that shit or get off the pot next step of getting married or breaking up that I suppose a lot of couples face. We'd had some great times, and though she was somewhat selfish and lazy, I figured I could do a lot worse. I'd hurt my back whilst on a round-the-world tour that I exclusively paid for, that culminated in me proposing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. Unfortunately, my back got worse when we returned, and I lost my job 1 month after the wedding. As I'd spent all of my savings taking us around the world, getting married, buying us a house, we were quickly broke. I struggled being unemployed and in pain. She coped by going out drinking with her friends most nights, and after several honest conversations it became obvious she would not be providing any support, emotional, physical, etc. It came to a head when I offered her £100, my only birthday money, so that she could go on a pre-planned weekend break, and she complained it wasn't enough. Edit. Thank you everyone, what a lovely experience. This was 2 years ago and we separated that day. We are still cordial and I wish her all the best. I never wanted kids, and given that she has recently had one with a new partner, it seems like at best she would have been making some not okay sacrifices to stay with me. I hurt my back picking up some wood and then hurt it a load more times doing random stuff like moving around. Yup, absolutely a lot of this was on me. I was poor, got some money, spent it, got addicted to painkillers. Anyone who knows someone on painkillers knows they aren't fun. My wife and I were on again off again in our early 20s. I broke up with her, then she would come over in a trench coat with nothing underneath and get me back that way. She actually has mental illness, severe anxiety and depression, but she didn't know it then. I really liked the good times, but when she went crazy I really didn't want any part of that. I couldn't leave her because I felt she was just misunderstood, even though my family didn't want me to marry her. I did, though. I proposed with my own free will and everything. Now, she has been to doctors and therapy and she deals much less with the anxiety and depression. I'm so happy I'm with her right now. She is my best friend and my lover. I truly expect to spend the rest of my life with her and be happy. Edit. Thank you kind stranger for my first gold smile. This is great to see a positive response. There's a lot more to our story, but I'm glad I shared today. My wife is an amazing woman and she has appreciated reading through the comments with me. Thanks for the Reddit love. All of the top comments are people pointing out the positive outcomes of their situation. I feel that it would be wrong for me to not share my story, which turned out differently. I knew from a couple of months into their relationship that I didn't love her. She came from a terrible home situation, and she was severely depressed with borderline personality disorder to boot. I felt so sorry for her. I honestly worried that if I left her, she would commit suicide. She had 2 little girls who needed someone stable and normal in their lives. I was afraid that I would be letting them down if I left. Who else was going to help them if I didn't? Before we got married she cheated on me, but she was in such denial about it that she managed to convince me that it didn't happen, although looking back on it, I know it's true. We fought almost daily. We screamed at each other, and she would get so angry that she would take things that were important to us, shared symbols of our love and affection, like her wedding rings, our marriage certificate, gifts that I bought for her, and attempt to destroy them or throw them away. I wasn't at all interested in having sex with her, and most of the time I wasn't able to force myself. She could sense that there was something wrong in our relationship, and she constantly made comments to me about how I didn't love her, and didn't want to be with her. Towards the end our fighting got so bad that it was sometimes physical. Never punching, or hitting, but shoving and grabbing one another. I felt like I was losing control of myself. I ended up in therapy, and had a relapse. I am a recovering addict, and had been clean for 3 years, when she and I got together. After we had been married for a while she started bringing men around, friends from work. She swore that nothing was happening with them, and by this point I was so detached from reality that I honestly didn't much care one way or the other. I finally had a breakthrough in therapy where I realized that her reaction to how I live my life is not my problem. We split up, and I spent the next 6 months spiraling deeper into my addiction before I started to come out of it. I have since remarried, to someone I do love with all my heart. But I still have nightmares. This is not hyperbole, actual, real-life nightmares. My current wife will tell me some mornings about how I was screaming, in my sleep, that I am still stuck in that horrible, abusive, loveless relationship. There simply isn't enough time for me to adequately express all of the different ramifications of that relationship. There was only one positive thing that came out of it, and that was that I learned that you cannot settle for a relationship. The person with whom you intend to spend your life has to be someone who meets all of your criteria, or you will never be happy with them. The negative consequences, on the other hand, are apparent in my everyday life even now, in my relationships with other people, especially my current wife, my finances, and my own general psychological well-being. Please don't stay with someone unless you're sure. Probably the best decision I ever made. 3 years ago I was so certain she was not the one for me simply because I was bored and wished I could kiss someone else. Well, one beautiful road trip vacation was all it took for me to realize we are perfectly meant to be together. We've been married almost 2 years and together 6. I couldn't be happier that I stuck it out and am confident in saying she is the one for me. This was me for 10 years, until I finally left. I remember knowing I didn't want to marry him, but he was dependent on me. He was occasionally abusive before, then his life circumstances made him angrier and angrier during the marriage and he took it out on me. It wasn't even the abuse that triggered me to leave. I didn't realize it wasn't a part of marriage. It was an interaction with a random stranger that told me I was beautiful. Just that little bit of kindness made me realize what a miserable hell I chose to live in every day. He made it as hard as he could to leave, but 5 years later I'm much happier. I still have depression to battle. But when I think about where I came from, I'd consider myself a survivor. I have been married for 31 years for just that very reason. I knew that first year one had made a horrible mistake, but I was pregnant by the time, so I felt stuck. I still feel stuck. Many things have happened in the years that should have made me leave, but I stay. My therapist is helping me become healthy enough mentally so I can finally be free. Cried at my wedding and the ladies took beta blockers to stop me hyperventilating and running away. I was only 21. Left him after 18 months in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes I was wearing. 44 now. What a young fool I was. I don't have stars in my eyes when I look at him, but I think he does for me. Anything I want to do is what he wants to do too, and not just to humor me. He seems to genuinely enjoy doing whatever it is that will make me happy. With time, I've come to appreciate him more and more to the point that now I don't know what I'd do without him. But I often think that he deserves someone better than me. He deserves someone who will look at him the same way he looks at me. I was dating an Australian dude for a couple of years. I'm American, and we exhausted all the visitor visas we could, visiting one another. Eventually, it came down to if we wanted to be together, we had to get married. We had dated a long time and loved each other, but neither of us really had marriage as a priority. So we sat down, wrote a pros and cons list, and decided getting married was the best thing for us. However, over the time we spent dating, he stopped doing a few things. Like showering. When he moved back to the States as my fiancé, I noticed just the smell of him was overpowering. I caught him at one point, saying he had just showered and didn't need one, but he actually hadn't showered in 2 weeks. He'd go down and swim in the apartment pool, and count that as a shower. In the summertime, I'm pretty sure he showered even less. I can't emphasize enough how bad it was. I literally had to throw away my couch because the stink seeped into it and I couldn't get it out. I discovered earlier in our relationship that he didn't know how to blow his nose. Tried to show him, but he said he couldn't do it, and would just pick his nose and wipe it on the desk. Got him to at least wipe it on a tissue, but he stopped doing that and wiped it on a wall near his desk where I couldn't see and would have the pleasure of discovering later. He also couldn't work in the States at this point, so he said he'd keep up the apartment while I worked. Yeah. He didn't. He wouldn't clean anything he thought I touched. The apartment was in squalor and filled with gnats and flies and a mountain of shipping boxes from his habit of ordering online. I eventually just bought paper plates and stuff and only used those, so he couldn't say I used any dishes and I could keep on him to clean up his own mess. Suffice to say, by the time the date to be married came around, I didn't want to. But he sold everything he owned in Australia. He owned his own apartment there, had his own car. He quit his job. I couldn't just send him back and not feel like a monster for not trying. So I tried. We got married. It was predictably awful. I spent a lot of nights staying at work until midnight, just drawing alone on my tablet so I could have some peace away from him. He was supposed to get a job when he got his green card after we got married, and he told me there was a 2-year queue for it to come in. At the time this wasn't unheard of, just a bit longer than usual, reasonable for a strange system. Yeah. He lied so he wouldn't have to get a job. Couldn't work without a green card. He got it in 6 months or so. I found out, huge fight ensued. Gave him one last chance to make it right, go get a job and get his shit together. He got an unpaid online internship. I continued my late nights at work, until one evening I was driving home, and just started screaming. Out of the blue. just screaming and yelling at myself for what was becoming of my life. I hated my job. I hated my home life. I hated the state I lived in. I was extremely depressed, and something had to change. Pulled over on the side of the road and just screamed at myself for letting it get this bad. So I went home. We had a fight. I laid out everything and told him I wanted a divorce. It was actually a pretty peaceful divorce. I think he knew by then that it wasn't working, too. But while we were in the middle of it, he knew I loved travel but wasn't well off, so he told me that I'd never get back to Australia without his help. It just so happened that I had recently looked at a map of the world and figured out where the exact opposite part of the world was from where I was, in just an idle wish to be as far away as possible. It was the ocean between Madagascar and Western Australia. With what he said, and that fact, that was enough for me. So quit my job, sold my stuff, got a year-long working holiday visa and moved near Perth. So I suppose it worked out okay for me, once it was all over. I don't think I would have had the motivation to do that, if I wasn't fueled by pure spite and desperation to never be where I was, again. I ended up working and traveling until my money ran out, through Aus, Hawaii, lived there a year, across the western US, and British Columbia, Canada. Then I moved to the place I liked most in my travels that didn't require a visa. So now I live near Seattle. I'm poor and single, renting a room with a couple of my closest friends, and extremely happy. Smile. TLDR, married a stinky man because he left everything in his home country to be with me. Gave it a try, he made the apartment into a stink hell and lied about his green card so he wouldn't have to work. Got divorced, moved across the world temporarily because he told me I couldn't, much happier. We decided to invest in our relationship, despite obstacles presented by family, which have since been overcome. That investment in each other has paid big dividends for us. We realized that we never wanted to break up with each other. Rather, it was outside meddling and negative influence that we wanted to get away from, and we did. We made the choice to stay for the kid when I became pregnant at 17. Even on my wedding day all I wanted to do was run away. I didn't want it, but I knew I couldn't make ends meet on my own and he was a great dad, even as young as we were. It's been 8 years and I can't say things have always been perfect. We really had a lot of growing up to do, but I'm so happy to have him by my side. We built our lives from the ground up and it's been a privilege. We've fought, nearly split a couple of times but we always come back to each other. He's my best friend and I really don't want to spend my time with anyone but him. About a year ago I actually found out he didn't want to get married either. He wanted to run away just as much as I did. So that was pretty interesting, because one of the reasons I didn't want to leave was because I didn't want to break his heart. Turns out he was thinking the same thing. Edit, my first gold. Thank you. Edit, just now reading the comments as a lot of you mentioned past posts. Our relationship is nowhere near perfect, but we are happy now. We've both made mistakes, and yes, I did tell him about how I started to develop feelings for someone else. I actually chose to change jobs and completely sever ties with that person. It wasn't worth losing him. Well, my first marriage was one of those situations. It went okay for the first year, then the next 3 years it limped along before going into a death spiral which ultimately ended up in a shit show of a divorce. If you're not happy in the relationship and can't see yourself wanting to be married to so don't do it. It's mentally and financially exhausting even without children involved unless by some miracle you can both come to agreements on everything. Second marriage has been infinitely better, always have trials and tribulations in a relationship but we love each other and support each other. It's been 10 years for me. I wanted to break up multiple times during those years, and we actually did a few times, but we always managed to come back to each other. Here are my thoughts on the subject. From my side, I always knew she was a terrific partner, but selfishly I wanted to live it up a bit, sleep with other people, chase other people, etc. I always thought that if I left her, I would rip her heart out, which prevented me from ever truly breaking things off. My love, when I was younger, was mostly built on things I wanted out of life, and I did not consider enough how my actions and thoughts would impact my circle of family, friends. Now here we are, 10 years into it, and I have to admit that while I've grown up substantially during those years, the way I love has grown and evolved as well. The things I love have changed. I am so grateful that my partner and I were able to stick together during those tough times. Now when I look at her, I see a strong, independent, caring, and wholesome woman that provides most of the things I need in life. It's funny because all this time I always thought she would be broken if we broke up, but now I see that I'm the one that needs her more than she needs me. She's an amazing human being with so many positive traits, Any man would be lucky as hell to have her. With the things I've put this woman through, it's a miracle that she still wants to be with me, but her love has grown and evolved as well. There's a beauty in our relationship, in how we've seen our personal and combined development over the years. I look at her, and I see a woman that's built up her strength, intelligence, and love over the years. From the get-go, she knew she wanted to be with me for life, and while it did take a little longer for me to realize this as well, I am happy that I see this. My recommendation for people that are suffering through the inability to decide on their relationships is to look at the intangibles in your partner. Are they generous? Loving? Caring? Do they see the beauty in other people? Are they forgiving? Do they make you feel special and beautiful? Sometimes we focus on one or two negatives in a relationship. The truth is that you'll never find someone on this planet that is 100% perfect for you all the time. There will be bumps. But if your partner is someone that demonstrates the above-stated values and more, then perhaps you should reconsider your position. Ultimately, you need to do what you think is best for you. Just remember that you will grow wiser over the years, and it may take a little longer for you to truly see what you had in your relationship. For every person unable to break off a relationship, there are dozens of others that did actually break off their relationship. And out of those dozens, there are a few that regret it down the road. I'm not saying you'll regret your decision, just that you will see the world differently multiple times over your lifetime, and the not-so-perfect partner you have now could end up being your perfect partner down the road. There are not enough wholesome and good people on this planet, and if you happen to be with one right now, then it may be worth your effort to work things out. That said, if you are completely disengaged from your relationship and causing your partner too much heartache, then perhaps you do need to break up. I'm simply providing my viewpoint and personal experience. To each their own.